We have two gentlemen with us for the next session. The topic will be change management and leadership during times of uncertainty. We have Sabi joining us, who is the business developer at ABN AMRO Bank. He's also the author of the book, What's Your Plan B? Now, I quite like that, Sabi. That's an interesting title. And the core questions or the core insights Sabi will be sharing will be around what kind of leadership is needed when it comes to change and what is the role of communication when it comes to change. And also Ricardo works for the Syngenta group, a group that I personally know very well. Ricardo heads up organizational development. And for Ricardo is his curiosity for learning and recognizing that there is nothing that he doesn't know that isn't continuously changing.
Thank you for inviting me to this amazing event. I'm very excited. Ideally, I would have been logging in from Amsterdam because that's where I live. But as of last week, I just came here for some family reasons to India. So quite some change in my own geography and life. So there's I think an event on change management is perfect to speak with so much change going around. As you mentioned, last year I did write a book called What's Your Plan B? And one of the things in the book that I cultivated was the role of leadership, how that affects one's job security and growth. And if you are in an environment where your leaders are incapable of making quick, swift decisions, you can face downward curve. I mean, we've seen examples from Kodak, for example, which was one of the highlight stories I had. I also believe in having good communication that I think strengthens all the change that is needed, especially in times of adversity. Because I think without a certain degree of empathy, without a certain degree of understanding and certain degree of energy, you won't be able to communicate your ideas to the team, especially when you are looking to make changes, drastic changes, because it's the call for the hour.
Thanks, Sabi. And I noticed on the chat, you're right, everyone can see you, they could see me. So I'm hoping I can now be seen as well. And you're not talking to an image. No. Okay, that's good. I've been holding out. I've been online all day, and so far it's been stable apart from one or two times. So we're looking good so far.
No worries. I mean,
tell us a little bit more about your book. Tell us a little bit more about your book. Have you? It is completed, right? You've already published it. It's already out there. Okay, tell us a bit more about your book.
Well, I had an idea in 2018 to do a book because I spoke to a lady. She was, say, in her mid-50s, and she told me her story that her husband and her worked in the same organization for 30 years, and after that, her husband lost his job. Okay. And now he was not young enough to find something and not old enough to go in pension. And there was a lot of frustration, stress at home. I mean, back in 2018, we didn't really know how to make good use of time if you're sitting at home. We now know. We didn't know 2 years back. And I tried to give some ideas, like try this, try that. And basically, nothing was sticking because what he wanted to do was go back to his old job. And I think that is one of the big reasons why we fail to embrace change in an organization, also in our lives, because we just want to keep doing what we are doing, not go out of the comfort zone. And I think that's something. So that's why I thought I want to address this topic. And then Ricardo joined.
He certainly did. Ricardo, do we have you? Can you hear us okay? I think you may be on mute. You may need to just put up your volume, possibly. We can see you beautifully.
We can't hear you, Ricardo, though.
No. Although I have to say, in the last few months, my lip reading skills have become much more fine-tuned. So I think
what Ricardo was saying, that he wants to invite me to his beach house in Spain.
Oh, that would be lovely, wouldn't it? I would like to come. In Mexico, right? It's somewhere very nice where I've always wanted to go and travel to.
At this point in time.
Well, in that case, Sabi, you could come here because I'm currently in the Provence. So if you want to come somewhere warm and nice, this is the place to come, right?
I'm in 38 degrees. You can't get warm. Maybe not.
Ricardo, do we have you with us? Is your microphone working? No, it's probably something to do with the settings on your local PC. So Sabi, back to your book whilst Ricardo tries to sort out his things. So clearly inspiration from someone you met to write the book and some very practical insights and ideas on how to, when you're hit, I guess, hit full speed with a massive change.
So, one of the first things why I'm most passionate about the change topic is that I do believe that if the leaders of our organization is not are capable of making decisions and correct decisions, drastic decisions in times of adversity, that organization will really suffer. And I have a story of a company, Indian-based company called Paytm, that so there was a big change that happened in India called demonetization, where major currency notes were taken out of the market because of government policies, and there was a scarcity of physical notes. Paytm capitalized that moment. They just went big with the mobile money, and the CEO said the employees worked 400 times of their normal capacity in those 2 weeks to make Paytm the leader in that market area. And their mantra was go big or go home. And I've spoken to several employees from Paytm, and they said it was the leadership. They gave us clarity what exactly they need to do. There were a lot of issues, there were a lot of escalations, a lot of things that were not going on. I mean, it's an economy of scale, India. If you want to do something here, it will, like a big chunk. Even if 10% things fall off the roof, it's a lot. It's 1.4 billion people. So there were a lot of escalation, a lot of stress, a lot of bureaucracy to handle. And the leadership was handling all of that at the same time, giving the perspective how to move forward. And I think without that kind of leadership, it is impossible to survive adversity and to come out of adversity, emerge out of adversity as a winner.
Yeah, no, very wise words. Ricardo, do we have your sound working? No, it's still not. You might need to, I'm not the expert here, but you might need to kind of completely check out and completely come in again. There we go. It's always a challenge, isn't it? So when you, you can't work out why it's not working, but it's not working.
and one of the things you mentioned in my introduction is about communication when things in adversity, why is it important? And I think you are right now the biggest example of that. Here we are, the microphone's not working, and you're keeping your cool, your poise, your energy, your smile, that nothing is wrong, and this is the energy that you're giving to the group. You are the leader.
You're very kind. You're very kind, Sabi.
So you are the best example of how to lead proper communication in times of adversity.
Yeah, it's like a duck. You're paddling hard underneath, but it's not noticeable on the surface. That's why I'm only showing this part of my body. Ricardo, do we have you now full on board? No, you don't know what it is. It's one of those things, isn't it? With or without your headset, it's hard to know which one's the better option. Sabi, maybe I can, whilst Ricardo's still trying to work it out in the background, maybe I can come back to you on this idea of sort of leadership skills in times of uncertainty. Do you have an example for us of, let's be honest, someone who's particularly effectively led in these very uncertain times, but also maybe someone who hasn't? I'd be really keen to have your insights on some of the things that you shouldn't be doing. And let's be honest, leaders sometimes think they do get it right all the time. And the reality is that people are kind of thinking, actually, no, they're not. So what is it? Give me some insights on the pluses and the minuses of things.
I actually asked a lot of people about this. And I think, the simple question sometimes, because everything is virtual, nobody can meet. I mean, because when you meet, there is also the handshakes, there is warm, there is like a high five. Yeah. Everything is virtual. The first questions is always, how are you doing? Now, with that, you also get the feeling if your leader is really concerned about you, about your well-being, or just want to know if the work is done or not. In the Corona times, you can really differentiate between the leaders who care about their people, who don't care about the people, just by how they frame the question and how much time they gave you to answer that question, how you're doing. If they just want a generic word so that they can move to the work, or they are actually concerned. Did I hear some sound from Ricardo?
I think there was a sound from Ricardo there. Yes, they seem to have something.
We hear something.
But it sounds like a robotic sound. I think we have a. Yeah, I think we've made some progress, Ricardo, but we can only hear you in sort of beeps. We can't actually hear you speaking. No. Sorry. I wish I had some magical powers that I can transmit to you to make this work for you, but I don't. So anyone in the audience who has magical powers, if you could transmit some of those to Ricardo, he would be forever grateful and be your best friend. So sorry, Sabi, you were saying, so these, you obviously scanned and surveyed some people that you spoke to before this session.
First thing is the empathy. And I think without that, nothing works. I mean, in times of crisis, you can see, one of the quotes I have in my book from a leader is you can change everything in an organization within 6 months. You can copy your competition's products, services, the change modules, the principles they have. The only thing you cannot copy is the culture. And the culture comes from top down. The culture of empathy, the understanding, that needs to come from top down. And I think people who are listening to this talk, I mean, please go back and reflect when you were asked this question in your BLAs or your one-on-one, how much time were you given to actually reflect on how you're doing? That really sets the tone and how motivated you feel, how connected you feel to be part of the common cause of an organization. So I think empathy is definitely a big skill.
Yeah, and it's what you're saying. The reason I'm nodding is because the session this morning, there was a very interesting session this morning with Malek and Henrietta, and the themes were around trust, humanness, and fairness, and empathy was a big theme within that, within parts of that. So I think, and a lot of people were resonating with that on the chat when it was mentioned.
I remember I spoke to a very senior person. I cannot name him because he wouldn't like to be named for the book I read. He was based in Turkey, and he told me that there was a lot of layoff in his companies they had to do because they were not making progress and the company was losing a lot of money. So once he had to get rid of 20-30% of people, and he saw the mood, and then the feeling was very pessimistic. Everybody was feeling low, down, depressed. They were like not motivated. So what he did was engage in one-on-one conversations. He was like a very senior leader, but he wanted to talk to everybody to inculcate that trust, that you stay back because you are important, and we have to do this because of the situation. So
any chance you can hear me now?
Yes. Woohoo!
If at first you do not succeed, you
try again. You did it, Ricardo. Perseverance and tenacity. Well done.
Exactly.
So I assume this was an entry test for change management and agility. Well done, Chris.
Resilience.
Yes, indeed.
So, Ricardo, the floor is yours, so you can share some of your pearls of wisdom with us on this topic of leadership and uncertainty.
I actually shared all of them. You just weren't able to hear them, unfortunately.
I know.
So, it's just the way it goes, right? Great to see you again, Sabi. So I was trying to listen in, and obviously, as I was playing with the mic here on and off, I caught some glimpses of Sabi's perspective. Last one ending on culture, which I think is critically important. But I'm struck by we're talking about times of uncertainty, and one of the aspects here is you're hearing a lot more often this whole VUCA term, and we know it's been around since Venice in the 80s, right? I mean, it was first introduced in the late 80s. It's been around forever, and I think we haven't talked about change or any kind of strategic consulting type discussion without hearing this term, right? And then now change is accelerating at unprecedented rates, or change is the new norm. We've all heard this. I don't think this is anything new. I think what I'm struck with is our inability, maybe as a change community or within organizations, to really shift and lean into this kind of new aspects of emerging change, right, or emergent change. And if you look at all the change models, right, Kotter's OCI methodology, or Kurt Levin's change model, the McKinsey 7S's, ProSci-ADCAR, they all have this the formulaic view, and they're all good, by the way. I'm certainly not saying anything against these methods and structures, but it's about let's get that vision right, and once we have that vision, we communicate, we stand behind it. Well, in times of uncertainty, the end state vision is not there, right? It's unclear. So how do we now really still inspire that movement and change without complete clarity on where we're going? Right. And I think this is the uncertainty that a lot of leaders are struggling with. And we see it now in COVID, right? There's a lot of energy around future of work, COVID, the new normal, or pick your favorite term, right? What's it going to look like? And I'll take a Google search and we'll find millions of articles on what it's going to look like. And the truth is we don't know, right? So how do we inspire positive movement towards the future when we don't know exactly which way it's going? Sabby, what do you think?
I think so too. We are going to be more uncertain, and the world is going to be more unpredictable than ever. The only thing we need to have is, I think, is the mindset to be constantly challenged that and ready to change. Being static and being complacent and being like, okay, this is good enough. Good enough is not good enough anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And so much, Carol Dweck's mindset book, right, has shifted for a lot of people the importance of certainly the growth mindset, right? How do we learn beyond, to do things that are beyond our current scope or ability to do so? But a perfect example we see now play out is Mars, right? We want to go to Mars. We don't know quite how to get there yet, but we're starting to explore. And 5 years ago would have been impossible to think about it 10 years ago. And now we're seeing, a helicopter flying around, right? So I think it's, it's having that mindset and understanding that this plays out slowly over time through ongoing shifts in culture, right? Which is really collective behaviors.
Yeah. Although I'm sure, to your topic of Mars, I'm sure Elon Musk would have a few, or Jeff Bezos would have a few things to say about that right now, as they reach up there, right? So
correct, and that's a perfect example, right? He has a vision. How's it going to play out? He doesn't know, right? But he's got a vision, and he's getting a lot of traction behind it. So the formulaic, clear the vision, create the vision, start moving the coalition, or freeze, unfreeze, depends which model you take, is slightly being shifted these days, and I think that's a good thing.
But
I wonder whether, if I may, Sabi, I wonder whether even having this element of competition, because there's clearly a competition, right? It's all about being the richest man in the world in this instance. There's been a lot of articles on this recently. Maybe you need that as well, to some sort of element of encouraging or getting the right behaviors out of leaders to make things happen. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't think competition is necessary. Sorry, I think it to each his own. Everybody has their stimulation. I think, for example, what I have seen I remember when Lehman Brothers I was working there in 2007 when Lehman Brothers was on the brink of collapse. Few days before, we had a meeting with our leaders, assuring us nothing would happen. And at that time, we were also reminded of how Lehman in the past has always bounced back and everything. And I could relate at the worst times to how, when you are reflected with the company's vision and mission that they made on good days, it's so stimulating. And that stimulated me. I mean, a competition stimulates Elon Musk. I mean, it really depends on what stimulates you. And it's good to know as a person what are your green buttons and red buttons. And also your leader should know which to press to get the best out of you.
Yeah. Ricardo, I'm a little bit familiar with Syngenta. Are there some things you would like to share in terms of best practices? You joined, I guess, 5 years ago, so it was probably just at the brink of the biggest cash ever acquisition by the Chinese, if I'm not mistaken. What have you seen happening over the last few years in terms of the way leaders behave in times of uncertainty? Even if ultimately it's a very, very positive context, it still creates uncertainty amongst people within the organization.
Sure, and that's, I think you hit on something again with uncertainty, right? We always say, we need to manage resistance, right? And it's actually about creating reception, right? Not managing resistance. I mean, because I think fundamentally people aren't afraid or they don't fear change, right? We all change constantly every day, our lives as we grow and evolve. What we fear is the unknown, right? So I think more and more we're understanding, and I've seen the leaders making that shift from how do we lean in to communicate more openly and authentically, right? So, we had a potential hostile turnover that was turned down. Again, this the now part of a larger Chinese company, Syngenta Group. We've seen these changes come on. So what we've understood is, well, in times of unprecedented change, as we've seen, and this is even pre-COVID, how do we really lean into both gaining the trust, building that psychological safety, and being authentic and sharing, openly the good and the bad. And I think in the change journeys, when I first came in, it was a large transformation program at the time. We had just brought in a change method. And since then, I've built a transformation and change community that is maintained, and we've embedded more of the methods and tools, right? And some of these obviously aren't necessarily fit for purpose for larger systemic changes, but the fundamentals are still there, right? So, again, is there a way to go? Of course, right? But the big test, sharing examples was the last year. I mean, if you and within the work I do, we have employee listening, for example. We're pulsing our organization. We did quite a bit of that during COVID and shifted those discussions into future of work discussions. And what we found is that one of the biggest impacts was the leadership resolve, resilience, and grit, I'll say, during the last year, right? And able to, obviously deemed in supporting agriculture as one of the companies that's essential. So we kept running. And if you saw our supply chains, our manufacturing facilities, and our R&D technicians who were going in and finding new ways to work, it's certainly easier for me. I put on a headset and that's the end of it. But folks that are going in were able to really make that shift quickly. And I think one of the biggest aspects that drove that was the leadership support in times of change, and communicating and openly sharing and supporting this move. And I think a big part of it is the humanizing it, right? Really understanding that everyone's struggling, and the last year has been incredibly hard, and a great deal of luck and privilege for me to be sitting here in Switzerland and comfortable in my home, but that's not the case around the world, certainly for all the markets that we play in. So being able to widen our net of support for all our now 47,000 colleagues around the world, I think is incredibly important.
Yeah. Thanks, Ricardo. Sabi, anything you want to say and to complete the comments that Ricardo has just made?
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounds very positive about the organization. Sounds very inspiring. I do see a question, and I'd love to or a comment in the chat about the leaders have unlearned the courage to make tough decisions, and something I really believe in. I think there should be like the two kinds of leaders in one person: the peacetime leader and the wartime leader. And you need that to survive adversity and changing times, because you can be this polder democracy nice leader who's all about people and everything, but when in times of crisis you need to be that assertive leader who can make quick prompt decisions without feeling insecure, without feeling hesitant. Whether the decision was right or wrong, we will find out, but not taking a decision is the worst thing that can happen. Or communicating an unclear, vague ideas. I mean, we've seen that with COVID. I mean, me and one of my friends, we were discussing to do a podcast on how every world leader has addressed COVID-related topics. One with the clarity and this is what we're going to do, this is what you cannot do, and some very vaguely, very diplomatically avoiding to take risky decisions or tough decisions. And I think organizations do that too. They sometimes hide behind lingos, jargons, and at the same time fail to make those firm, assertive decisions. And I think we need more wartime CEOs, people who are capable of making unpopular yet essential decisions, because sometimes the best decision is to make a decision and make the best out of it.
Yeah, very good. And I could see Ricardo nodding in the background. Gotcha, what are your final thoughts on this topic? Change management leadership during times of uncertainty you'd like our audience to take away today?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would steal a page from the agile, and I saw earlier one of your speakers was touching on it, right? One of the things that I think this has done in the last couple of years is primed our organizations to do some of the things Sabi, you were talking about, right? How do we empower across, right? So the decision is also distributed, and those who are closest to the work can make the decisions. And certainly the other aspect for me is this experimenting, right? So back to Sabi's point, you can make a decision, it's wrong, great, what a learning opportunity, let's move on. So I think, one of the things I remember when I first took a change methodology, I was working as a consultant, and we tried to adapt it instead of a waterfall to an agile project. And back then, this was, I'm dating myself, but it was a while back, and agile was still just catching on for these major projects. And we first started saying, well, let's do what we've always done, but in kind of iterative sprints somehow. We were playing with it. Now we're a little bit better at that, and we're recognizing that we, the the change of pace needs to equal that of the organization's ability to obviously adopt, like it's always been the case. But I think we can really take some of the aspects of saying we don't have to get it right. We don't know the vision, and we don't have to get every aspect of this right. And as long as you open that dialogue, even if you've misassessed an impact, you're not communicating the way you should, you've maintained the ability to say, hey, listen, that's great. We've now learned, and couched it from an aspect of learning versus failure, as you've heard through Agile. And I think that's the way to go forward. And for the change practitioners, I think it is a matter of being courageous in taking those decisions moving forward, and ensuring we have a feedback loop to measure and gauge as we go along.
Thank you, Ricardo. Sabi, maybe last few words from you before we close the session.
Yeah, I think I always heard this line when I was growing up: if you always do what you did, then you always get what you got. But in times like now, if you always do what you did, then you will not even get what you were getting. So you have to do more. You have to be ready for adversity and leaders as well. Because something, I'm going to steal a line from my own book, if I can do that.
Sure.
If you sweat more during peacetime, you will bleed less during wartime. So in peacetime, be prepared. Think something. Be prepared for adversity. And enable your people. Encourage your people. Work on their communication and ability to, embrace change. And that will pay off when ships are down. If you sweat more during peacetime, you will bleed less during wartime.
And on those final words of wisdom, I would like to thank you both, gentlemen, for your insights this afternoon. It was good to have you eventually, Ricardo, able to share. Thank you for being so persevering. And Sabi, thank you very much for all your insights as well. Take care, both of you.
Great seeing you again, Sabi. Thank you, Chris.
Take care. Bye-bye.